I've built a few gauge 1 live steam locomotives so far. This is the next one I'm going to build, and it's going to be scratch built and it's going to be live steam, and I hope you find the series of following videos interesting to watch. Hello and welcome to part 20 of the gauge 1 GWR Great Western Prairie tank scratch build. And you may wonder what I'm doing. Am I making a spring? Nope. Certainly see I'm bending some metal round, some wire. This is silver solder. And continuing on from our last episode where we're starting to make the boiler, I'm starting to prepare now for the welding, for the silver soldering. And the reason why I'm doing this, I'm making some little coils, because what I like to do to set it up for silver soldering is I make a little coil, a bit like a spring, and chop a bit off and just put one round each of these pipes. That just means that when we heat this up in the flame and we get the flux flowing, these silver solder little rings will all just nicely melt and all flow around the edge of the tubes. Just dab a little bit of flux around each of these. This comes as a powder, and you just mix it to like a yogurt consistency. Plenty of flux, because it's with the flux. Plenty of flux, the silver solder. The silver solder will flow. By the way, if you like this video, please hit the subscribe button and the like button on the channel. Very much appreciated. So let's start to gently place some heat on the workpiece. And I'm just concentrating on the far end, just gently heating up that area. And you'll see the flux, the water moisture starting to evaporate and the flux it's starting to go like melted toffee. Again, don't heat it up too quick, otherwise the flux will burn off before it has a chance to do its job. And you can see now the flux changing colour, and at the same time it's preheating the other joints further away from the torch. And eventually, as I've said, that flux will change colour from like a burnt toffee look. It'll go clear. And at the time when it starts to go clear, that's when you're reaching the temperature when the silver solder starts to melt. As you can see here now, that silver solder is starting to melt now and flow around that flux. So just keep it in the air and eventually spread it across the rest of the workpiece. With the soldering done, we have to pickle this now. And basically what the pickling does, it cleans up all the flux and gets all the dirt off and gets a nice clean surface again. You'll see what I mean once it's been pickled. Now you can pickle these, you can use sulfuric acid, which is very good, but you've got to be very careful with it. If you splash it or get it on yourself or splash it in your face, it could seriously spoil your day. So I use a more gentle approach, which is citric acid. It does the same thing, but it takes a little longer. Now we'll just drop this in. Now you see what I mean there. If that was possibly sulfuric acid, you do run a risk of getting a splash. Here's the inner firebox completed now, silver soldered up. I'll show you there, silver soldered up, and we've got a nice flow, nice penetration of silver solder that's also come through to the inside, so that's good. Got a nice even distribution of the silver solder, so that's looking quite reasonable. And you see here I've just got the tube plate fitted in, and what I'm doing now is a little bit of planning for the fire tubes. The boiler will sit there. Now obviously this is the inner firebox, but that's the distance the boiler will, that's the position where the boiler is going to sit. So I've made 7 fire tubes. We need 7 fire tubes, and these fit in, give you an idea like that. So that gives me the planning. So the fire tubes, you can see, running the length of the boiler and just stopping just by the smoke box, and the little bit of the longer bit of the boiler will just fit into this part of the smoke box. So with these 7 fire tubes that we have, I need to prepare them for, let's say, soldering into here, as they all drop in like so, etc, etc. So what we've got to do is, what I always do is just to, if you like, prepare them ready for the silver soldering. Grab a pen, because here's our tube plate, and the fire tubes fit in there. So they go through the hole and they just pop through, just slightly protrude, so they just pop in there and protrude about 1/16 of an inch. But what we've got to make sure is that when I solder these, start to silver solder these up, they don't fall down, and they want to stay in the same position, because there will be nothing worse than having all these in position, silver soldering them up, and one of them to drop down slightly, because that will completely ruin things. So what I do is I put like a little shoulder on the fire tube. Here's what the fire tube looks like at the moment, like that. So you take the fire tube, and there's a little rolling tool I have that puts in a little shoulder, exaggerated, looks like that. Let's draw it like that. It just means that the fire tube won't drop down and won't move as I begin to silver solder this. Oh, here's what the little device I'm talking about. You see there, it's got a slight recess, and we put this in the lathe and we just run it against the end of the fire tube. And to do that, what I need to do again is anneal these tubes. So we need to heat them up to a bright red just to soften them, so we can make this little ridge in the end of the tube. So here we go. And it's just a case of heating this up to a bright red, as you saw me do with the firebox plate. Just get this nice and red. And we anneal the tubes at the end, let them cool down, and we just put it in the chuck, and I've stuck it right close to the end because this copper is going to be quite soft, so we need to be careful we don't deform it too much. It's just a case of now feeding this in gently. So here's our piece of tube that's been, if you like, knurled, had the little ridge put on there, and that's just enough. And so when I drop this in this tube plate, it won't fall down. Alright, what I've just made here is just a couple of copper brackets. And what these are for is to hold the tube plate into position. The tube plate, or the fire tube, the firebox tube plate fits in here. need to tweak that a little bit, but roughly speaking it fits in there. Need to do a little bit of bending. That's okay, it's there, yeah. Alright, so a little bracket in each corner to hold the tube plate into position and also give us a little bit more strength as well. So that's about where the tube plate will fit. What I normally do is just ease it just slightly below the edge. So what I can do is I can sit a little bit of, I can fit the silver solder in, if you like, just round this lip. So silver solder will fit all the way around here and we'll get a nice even flow. But the first thing to do, say, is to fit these brackets on, and this is just a case of just drilling and riveting, which is what I will go ahead and do now. I'll drill the first hole. I'm just going to spot through now to ready to rivet this on. Let's get that in position. Okay, there's the first hole. So let's get set up in the vise and go and rivet this one in position now. We're using slightly thicker rivets than you've seen me use before, but the process is exactly the same. Chop a little bit off. And knock this one into position. Here's the first rivet in position, and what I'll do, I'll go ahead and put the other rivet in and also rivet this other bracket on here. Ready to start silver soldering in the fire tubes. Here's our firebox, plenty of flux around it, and you notice also I've added some insulation here, mainly to concentrate the heat in this area that we need. So I will fire up my blowtorch and we'll begin to silver solder this, and it's exactly the same as the previous clip you saw. Play the blowtorch on, get the flux flowing, and the silver solder will flow as well to the heat. There we are, all soldered up now. What I shall do now is just pop that in the pickling solution like we saw before and let that have a good pickle and descale. Right, here's the, as you can see, the firebox and the boiler water tubes. I'll be calling these fire tubes for a while, but these probably are called the water tubes, and these here inside are more likely the fire tubes. But this is the inside of the firebox with the water tubes all soldered into position, and there's also been a really good penetration of the silver solder through. Probably can't see that on the camera, so you've got to look there now, but there's been a real good penetration of silver solder through onto this side, so I'm fairly confident that shouldn't cause us too many problems, and I don't think there'll be any leaks that we'll have to subsequently fix, but you never know. But there's the main part of the firebox and the water tube soldered, all soldered together. And what we'll be doing with the next episode is we'll be carrying on with the next stage of building the boiler. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you like it. If you have, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. And hopefully we'll see you again for the next episode.